Hello everybody and welcome. In this video series, I'm going to walk through each learning path at Web Security Academy by Portswigger to solve the labs and learn practically about web application penetration testing. And today I want to start by API testing, which is very important to test the security status of modern web application. But before starting, we have to know what an API is. If you are familiar with this concept, you can jump to the next part. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is a method of communicating with an application using its functionality and data without knowing its internal structure. You usually have an interface to send data to the application and in response receive the processed data. To understand it better, I have prepared a simple client-server Python application that contains a list of APIs in the server code. As you see, it is a Flask application with a very simple in-memory database containing information about users, and then here is the list of APIs. This code is publicly available in my GitHub repository, and I will put the link in the description of this video. Let's work with it in VS Code. And now you see the server part and the first API here. Defining an API in a Flask application is as simple as defining a normal Python function. You just have to add app route decoration at the beginning of this definition. And through this decoration, you define how the API is accessible. The main difference between API routes and normal route functions in Flask is that APIs do not render HTML. They process and return data usually in JSON format, so it makes them faster and more suitable for data exchange between applications. The first argument of app route decoration is the path used to access API. And as you see, it will be part of the whole URL for accessing API. And since I'm running this code in my local system, it contains my local IP and the default port number for Flask applications. There is a naming convention to use the word API in API paths, and this makes it easier to find applications' APIs by searching for the paths that contain this word. But remember, this is not mandatory, and some applications may not follow this convention. Let's explain each API in more details. The first API is used to get all users' information, and it is defined using the method argument. Each API is accessible through different methods, and the method is defined as the second argument of app route decoration. As you see, this API has get method, and it means that it is used to get information about something. And here you see that it returns the list of users' data in a JSON format. Let's run this code with Python server.py, and now you see that it is available in this URL. I copy it and use my browser, and this is normal because there is no HTML code bounded to this URL. But if I add API users to the end of it, now you see that it returns the list of users in a JSON format. There's another API in this code with get method that lets you access information about a specific user. You just have to add the user ID at the end of this URL. And then the server searches for the intended user ID, and if it finds it, it returns its information in a JSON format, otherwise it returns an error message. Let's try this. I add 1 for the first user's information, then 2 for the second one, and 3 for a non-existing user. Let's go to the third API. This API uses a post method, which is usually used to create a new record of data in the database. As you see, it uses the same URL as for getting all users' information. The difference is just in method. So these two functions can be merged into a single API with two different request methods. The post request should contain the required information in JSON format. In our case, we have to send name and age of a user, and the identity is automatically assigned to the new record. And in response, it returns the new user information in JSON format. We are not able to use a browser to test this API because by default a browser sends a GET request when you enter a URL. Of course, the browsers are able to send POST requests, but through the JavaScript codes and forms in the browsed HTML file that is currently not available. So we can use the client code in this sample application that uses the request library to send a request to each API in the server code. From the first API, you see that it is sending a GET request to get all information about users, and this information is in the response in JSON format. Next, you see another GET request to receive the information about a specific user, a user with ID 1, and again, the response is in JSON format. To send a POST request and create a new user, we first have to prepare our new user's information in JSON format and then use the request library to send a POST request to the specific URL with our JSON data. And then we receive a response that contains information about the new created user in JSON format. Another way to test APIs with POST requests is using applications like Postman. In this application, you can enter the URL of your intended API and choose your request method. For example, I use the URL for my API with both GET and POST request methods. Paste it here. And as you see, there are different types of requests here available. First, I try GET requests and send it and receive all information about users in JSON format. I can also add an index at the end of URL to get information about a specific user. Now let's go to the POST request. To send a POST request, we should add the required information into the body of the request. I select JSON for the format of this information. Let's say I want to add a user with name test and age 23 and send it. In response, it returns the information of this user to confirm that it is added. Now I send a GET request to the same URL to the same API, and you see that this user is added to the list of users. Now let's go to the next API. This API has PUT method and it uses the same URL as for getting information about a specific user. So we can merge these two functions into a single API with different methods PUT and GET. PUT methods are usually used to update an existing record completely. We just have to add the intended user's identity at the end of URL. And in backend, the server searches for the intended user's information. And also, it extracts information for updating the record that should be added to the request in JSON format. Usually in PUT methods, all the fields are required. So I check here that both name and age are provided. Then the intended user record is updated with new information. Let's test it with PostMap. I change the method into PUT and add 3 at the end of URL. First, I just provide one field, just name, and you see it gives me an error that both fields are required. So I also add age, and in response it returns the updated record in JSON format. Now I send a GET request to users API to check that this record is updated. Okay, perfect. Next function adds patch method to the same API, and with patch method we update existing user information partially. So we do not need to provide all the fields in a record in this request method. Let's test it with postmap patch. I want to patch user 3 and just change the age from 43 to, for example, 18. Send it. And you see the age is changed. And finally, the last function adds delete method to the same API to delete a user by user ID. Let's test it with postmap to delete third user, and the user is deleted. I can use the users API with get method And you see that the third user is removed from the list. There are two other request methods here, head and options, that I have not implemented. These request methods are mainly used for metadata, debugging, and capability check. With a head request, we ask a server for headers only. It's very similar to a GET request, except that the server does not return a body. We usually use head requests to check if a resource exists or get metadata such as content type, content length, or last modified date. And with options request, we ask the server for more information about supported HTTP methods and capabilities. And finally, I run the client code to send the request to all the APIs available in server. As you see, all these APIs in the server are publicly available with no authentication and no authorization. Anyone can send a request to create a new user, change the current user's information, and delete a user. So this server is currently not secure, and it needs some security configuration that we will cover in the next videos. So stay here for next videos about web application pen testing and Python. Thank you for watching.